Good afternoon, and welcome to a presentation on what's possible when systems truly collaborate. This is a presentation done in collaboration between the Virginia Department for Aging and Rehab Services and Griffin Hammis Associates, along with VCU RRTC for their DRIP grant.
My name is Nancy Brooks Lane. I'm a senior associate with Griffin Hammis Associates. And I'm excited to spend this time today with Richard to share with you some of the lessons learned and next steps planning around this Virginia statewide customized employment training and technical assistance initiative.
And just to get the story started, I want to talk a little bit about Virginia and our vocational rehab program to give some context and just give a sense of the topography here in Virginia as it relates to employment services and some of the challenges that job seekers with disabilities have, and what we hope to achieve with our customized employment project. So again, Virginia VA DARS is the state federal vocational rehab program. It's a program where it's eligibility based, and we assist job seekers with disabilities and help them prepare for, enter, or engage in employment. Again, participation is voluntary. In terms of the state of Virginia, just kind of our footprint, what we have with DARS, there's approximately 200, give or take, 20 or so vocational rehab counselors throughout the state and 30 different field offices. We also have 5 distinct VR districts. In addition, most of the services that we are providing for our consumers as it relates to things like supported employment, customized employment, community support services, or pre-ET services are things that we purchase from our CRP organizations. In Virginia, we call them ESOs, Employment Service Organizations. And there's approximately 80 different CRPs around the Commonwealth that we're working with. So in terms of really getting a feel for how exciting the work that we've been doing with Griffin and Hammis is, and how important it is, I want to talk a little bit about the paradigm shift. And so shift happens, right? So the bottom line is we need to be ready for change and recognize that change and growth and kind of having a dynamic process is part of putting together programs and services that are responsive to the changing times. And in Virginia, as we kind of look at some of the things that have been going on that have impacted our agency, have an impact in terms of the types of individuals we're working with, the challenges, the complexity, as well as some of the types of goals that we're shooting for. Things like employment first has had a significant impact. It's really led to more individuals with IDDD diagnoses coming in for services. And it's also changed the way that we've kind of defined what is our measure of success. So in Virginia with Employment First, we're looking at competitive integrated employment being a priority. We're looking at supporting folks with making informed decisions about competitive integrated employment. In fact, with DARS, we are now at a point where the only closures that we have that we accept are closures that are in competitive integrated employment. Some of the other things, and I'm sure folks that are listening in from other states are going to be familiar with this, that have had an impact in Virginia would be the Workforce Innovation and Opportunities Act, which is really changing the several different factors in terms of how we do VR. Firstly, it's really creating a situation where we're able to direct more resources to working with youth in transition and school youth with disabilities. And prior to them entering the VR program, helping them explore career opportunities, develop work readiness skills, ideally have some community work-based experiences, the kind of things that I think 3 years down the road are really going to have a high return on that investment as folks exit out of the school and they're at a higher level of readiness to participate and benefit from the VR program. In addition, in Virginia, we have some unique programs and services, some of our more innovative things that are really kind of shaping what's going on. For example, Project Search would be one of those programs. Project Search is a program where we're working with job seekers with disabilities in their last year of high school, and they're going to to participate in a community business, typically hospitals, where they do a series of internship-based experiences. And this program runs concurrently with the school year. The intended outcome is paid employment and competitive integrated paid employment. So moving forward, just in terms of, again, like some of the forces and dynamics and policies that are shaping VR that have kind of set the scene for success with programs like customized employment, I want to talk a little bit more about employment first. And I would like to frame it this way. It's really a bottom line, it's a better way of doing business. It's a better way of supporting individuals in terms of addressing barriers, ensuring that they're making good informed decisions and that misconceptions or fears related to losing benefits or misunderstandings about who can participate and benefit from VR services are addressed. That not only do we provide the right information to individuals that we're working with, but that we also ensure they understand the information. And really, they're two separate things. It's one thing to kind of understand the rules and the policies, but then putting folks in a position where they can gain some experience, have discovery, have new insights, and really have an applied kind of in vivo type of learning experience, we believe is going to be a great incentive in terms of opening up more career opportunities for folks and getting them into real jobs for real pay. Other things that we're looking at, like when we talk employment first, better way of doing business, it's something that our businesses can benefit from. If you look at the numbers in terms of unemployment rate with people with disabilities, it's still really lagging behind. So again, we feel like that there's a largely untapped pool of human resources that businesses have not been able to really adequately tap. A lot of it has to do with attitudes and beliefs, but a good portion of it has to do with the kind of supports and services that we can provide. And I believe things like Employment First and WeOA are going to open up the door in terms of the new service array and the new target audiences that we're able to start working with. And then in terms of the community, communities benefit when there's more diversity. When folks that have disabilities are part of the workforce, they're more independent, they have a higher quality of life, they're participating and engaged in the community. We know that those kind of systems thrive, and it's really reflective of the overall population. So it's an ideal goal to strive for, but it's also something that will have a positive return on that investment for individuals, for businesses, and for the community, we believe.
Absolutely.
So as we also kind of look at some of the shifts and some of the opportunities that come from things like Employment First and WeOA, customized employment is absolutely one of those new programs that is a byproduct of changes in the rules and the regulations and expanding the kind of service array that VR can provide. And I think if you look at customized employment, I kind of like to describe it as a really unique opportunity that's available to us, and it's emerging kind of at that confluence of the changing policies, the changing beliefs, the changing opportunities. And as a service, what we can do and the intended outcome of customized employment is something that fits so much with what we know about the challenges. You know, things that maybe in the past we weren't doing so good with that we can now do better with. Customized employment is a way to work with individuals and really come up with a very individualized, person-centered plan for supporting them, helping them find employment in the community and paid jobs, helping them find, it might be entry-level work for somebody that's never worked before, but the promise of customized employment is it's entry-level work in a career pathway that they can grow in, or entry-level work in a job that offers a promise of increased earnings down the road, versus maybe the old business as usual model where folks might be working in fast food or folding boxes or being a bagger. We really want to get folks involved and engaged in the workforce and really put them in a position where their talents are an asset to businesses.
Absolutely. And the Medicaid waiver setting rule and WIOA speak to the importance of using best practices and evidence-based practices. And then the new legislation that is just now being talked about regarding sub-minimum wage actually names customized employment, which of course includes discovery, as an evidence-based practice. So it's becoming more strongly embedded in policy at the federal level, that of course trickles down to the state level and other policies and practices that have to be aligned along with funding.
Now, Nancy, I really like how, in terms of talking about customized employment, part of that discussion includes looking at customized employment as being an individualized relationship between an employee and employers to meet the needs of both.
Absolutely. It's not about a program. It's not about pity hiring.
Yeah.
It's absolutely about there are individuals that need to be included in the workforce to make communities stronger, more diverse, and for everyone to have those opportunities that we all value for a working life and an inclusive life when we're not working.
Yeah, and again, it kind of comes back to my point about a convergence, and that it's really in doing this and doing this work well and doing it with fidelity and honoring kind of what the underlying intent of customized employment is, we're addressing more than one problem, right? Mm-hmm. We're helping folks get engaged in the community, giving them meaningful work, and then we're addressing significant skill gap needs that businesses might have.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So as I move forward into this next section of the discussion, I want to talk a little bit about more specifically what Virginia has been doing with our partner agencies, with Griffin and Hammes, to develop customized employment services, recognizing that we see this as a more of a long game kind of project, that it takes time, and that if we do it right, we're going to really put together a model that addresses the needs at all levels, whether it's addressing capacity and making sure that when we look at capacity, we're not just thinking about getting people in seats in a classroom and getting that didactic training and saying go and do it, but we want to create a model where we have the levels of supports available, the mentors, the supervision, to move folks beyond just knowledge competency, but get them to skills competency, so that they really can unleash their full potential as providers of customized employment and go out there and do this art.
And that has implications for how we train individuals. We have to utilize best practices models around adult learning, and I'll speak to that a little bit later, and immersion into the process where individuals go out and practice the methodology they're learning under the tutelage of a subject matter expert before they're expected to go out on their own and begin to implement the strategies and the methodology.
Yeah, and it's easier said than done. And I'm excited for some of the information you're going to share a little bit later on about the training model and how it ties to adult learning and why certain things are in place and why they're so important. But in terms of the slide you're seeing right here, what I did is I wanted to kind of give us a little bit of a framework to talk about what's going on in Virginia, not only some of the work that's already been done, but the work that's being done right now and kind of where things are headed. And what I'm using here is the systems change model, which actually is a model that has been used a lot in research to kind of understand better systems change as it relates to employment first. Mm-hmm. And not only looking at kind of how we build capacity, how we develop new services, but also how does things like policy tie into it? How does the concept of sustainability and scalability and buy-in tie into all these things? And so with this model, kind of the underlying theme here at the very bottom you'll see is interagency collaboration. And I will say that is absolutely the glue of everything that we're doing. Good, strong partnerships that are co-developing and working alongside one another towards a shared vision and a shared intended outcome. Under the circle titled Catalyst, you also see information talking about leadership and values. And then you move over and then we get to strategy, where that gets to some of the financing, the policy and the goals and service innovation. And then our intended outcome there, right, is the integrated jobs. Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to walk you through a little bit and give some examples of how our stuff fits into this.
And those important components, there has to be alignment. So between initiatives, policies that are addressed based on best practices, evidence-based practices that then tie into the actually the day in and day out work that organizations do around the systems change work.
Yeah, it's really a systematic process. We need to be strategic about it, and we need to be intentional about the things that we're doing.
Absolutely.
You know, there's a saying is if you don't change course, you might just end up where you're headed. And I think, you know, the way to avoid that kind of stuff is to begin with the end in mind and,
Right.
and really kind of have this kind of model to guide the work that you're doing as you move forward.
Absolutely, and there should be a sense of urgency from all of us that do this good work. It's about time, right?
Amen. I'm with you. So on this next slide, before I get into some of the more pragmatic aspects of the work that we're going to be doing, I want to talk about values. I want to talk about ideals and beliefs, attitudes, and culture around individuals with disabilities, work, and then just understanding kind of the meaning of work and full participation and engagement in the community. And let me start by talking a little bit about this picture. So this photo that you see on here, this drawing that you see on here was something that my daughter did. And it must have been about a week ago. I was sitting in my living room and I was really kind of thinking about how I wanted to talk about this specific slide. And I was a bit stuck. I was kind of, you know, in my own box, so to speak. And when she presented this photo to me, I started looking and I was like, honey, can I use that for a training I'm going to do? Because it's giving me some inspiration. And so she smiled and she gave me the thumbs up to use this. And what really got me about this was just kind of the emotion that it pulled out in me, and then looking at the picture and seeing the mushrooms on there. And I kind of came up with this idea that really there's an analogy. When we talk about historically how we've thought about disability, kind of the culture and the norms and the attitudes, and we've thought about disability and work more specifically, I think it in a lot of ways could be compared to how someone might think about a mushroom. Somebody that's ignorant on the topic of mushrooms, walking around maybe in the backyard and you see a mushroom laying in your grass and you're either going to pull it up or you're going to think, ew, that thing's kind of slimy, right? Like, why is that there? And I did a little research on mushrooms, and the really cool thing about mushrooms is there are hundreds of different kinds of mushrooms, and there's just as many uses from mushrooms, whether you're talking about medicinal kind of care or holistic health is a food source. But the one thing that really caught my eye, and I think this applies very well to kind of understanding the shift in perspective that we need to have when it comes to disability. So I ran across a story of a young woman that was in South America, had grown up very impoverished, had been in an abusive family, and was not able to get through school, and had the fortunate opportunity to be exposed to somebody that taught her how to grow mushrooms. And actually, she ended up taking this business of growing mushrooms, which are really easy to grow. You can actually grow them indoors. It's not very intensive in terms of products and supplies. But she ended up creating this whole business out of this. And one of her discoveries, and she talks about mushrooms, is it's, if you look at it, it's something that can create positive out of negative. Okay, and my example is, there was an area in the community where there had been an oil spill, and the ground had been contaminated. They weren't able to use this ground anymore. They weren't able to plant things in there. But they planted mushrooms in this area, and mushrooms use waste, right? So the things that were in the environment that was a problem for us, the mushroom took it and leached it out of the soil. And not only when they went back did they get and test the ground no longer had any traces of the contaminants, but the mushrooms were also healthy and had no traces of the contaminants. And those mushrooms were able to give back then to the community. And so if we take that kind of idea, that concept, and we think about how we look at disability, and we get away from that model of disability deficit checklist thinking, right? We move more to a social model of thinking about disability. What we recognize is, you know, the barriers and the obstacles aren't inherent to the disability. The barriers and the obstacles are out there in the community. It's the barriers and the obstacles exist because of attitudes, because of the environment, you know, a range of things. And if we really want to make a change, if we want to kind of unleash the full potential and all of the return on investment that we can get from our neighbors, our sons, our daughters, folks that we know in the community with disabilities, then we need to shift that. And we need to look at how can we ensure that we all are on the same page in terms of the vision and the values and the beliefs, what's worthy, what's acceptable, what's not, and then really use that as a guiding point. And the way I'll loop this back into this next slide here is to say that in terms of our interagency collaboration and leadership, one of the things I'm so grateful and thankful for is my partners that are sitting around the table and working with us on this. We all share that same vision. We all share the same values and the same belief that our investment in this work is about creating outcomes that benefit the community, that benefit job seekers with disabilities, that lead to quality of life, self-sufficiency, and businesses and communities that really are rewarded because there's more diversity and more participation.
Absolutely.
So some of the things, and just to give y'all an example, in looking at kind of setting some values-based targets in terms of the work that we're doing today with customized employment. We talked about as a group wanting to develop and demonstrate an evidence-based model that is integrated fully and incorporated into each agency's programs. Now, we felt like we needed that proof of concept, right? Customized employment holds so much promise, but we anticipate there'll be resistance out in the community, right? And in order for us to really be able to get it to the point where it's integrated fully within our programs and across the community, we need to demonstrate to folks, we need to show them how it works and reach them more at that visceral level so that they can connect to it and they're willing to invest in it. I think the other thing that we're looking at is that capacity component, right? So in terms of providing good services, we need to make sure we have folks that are trained up, that we have individuals that have the knowledge and the skills competency to do this work. But I think training goes a little bit deeper, and I know you'll talk about this in your slides, but that we have organizations that have invested in that transformation process so that there are supervisors that understand the value and the importance of customized employment, that they buy into that, and that as they work with those who work under them, that they are supportive and they're reinforcing good fidelity work versus being a barrier to doing that. And then lastly, I think we want to improve and just as important, if not most important here, on those competitive employment, integrated employment outcomes for individuals with the most significant disabilities in Virginia.
Right, I think we get hung up on the social construct of disability. And one thing that I love to do in training is when folks start talking about community-based ideas that are still within a disability framework. And when we begin to think about how would we begin to think about options or solutions or opportunities with individuals who we care about and love, and begin to think about those same community-based resources, those generic ways in the community that we can begin to solve problems and create options for folks. There's a huge paradigm shift.
Yeah.
And people, it takes a bit to move past that. So because we've so ingrained within our philosophy and thinking about disability that it's got to be in this disability framework.
Yeah, it's huge. And just to share something kind of personal as it relates to that, I've been working in the disability field since 1998, been doing VR work since 2002, and I've been in the field. I've worked as a dedicated counselor for long-term mental illness. I've worked in our independent living program. Before coming and doing the customized employment stuff, I was helping to develop specialized employment programs for individuals with autism. So I've done a lot of work. And throughout my career, I've always found this work so rewarding. I think it's the only thing I could have ever done. I love this work, and it's really important to me. But 3 years ago, when my son was diagnosed with autism, and I started having nights laying in bed, worrying about what's going to happen and how do I support him, and all the challenges and obstacles to knock down and overcome, it really changed the stakes for me. And so when we do talk about these values and these attitudes, for me, it's a must. It's not a nice to. It's foundational and it's core, because if we can't shift that in the broader community by demonstrating the value and the return on investment to all of our different audiences, then we might as well be building a house without the foundation on shaky ground, right?
Right, right. Well put.
So the other thing, in terms of kind of talking about the work that we're doing with partners, we have kind of multiple levels as we're doing this. I think, kind of thinking about state leadership, but then also how do we engage other stakeholders? How do we bring the learning, the work, the investments that we're all contributing to at that state level, and kind of bring it down to the field, right? And to people that are out there in the community doing the work, really involved. So in terms of talking about kind of that interagency partnership and how do we structure that and design that, we've got multiple levels. I want to talk first a little bit about kind of at the state level what we're doing, because I think part of groups working together and being effective is making sure that there's some ground rules, right? And we have some kind of framework that really kind of identifies what are our roles, what are our responsibilities, a framework that really ensures equal contribution, equal responsibility, and also ensures that there's an equal voice, that we have a format that allows for healthy discourse around differences of opinion or differences of strategy, or maybe even kind of those system challenges that come up when you're trying to translate something, from one agency to another.
And I think that ties into, we don't use the same language.
Oh my goodness, no.
So but that further adds a level of confusion.
It does. But so let me tell you how this is a good example, though, of the quality of our partnership. DARS in this partnership has the lead role, okay? But it's an interagency partnership where we've got our behavioral health group, DBHDS, we got our blind agency, DBVI, and the Department of Education all around the table. And again, we have an MOU that kind of outlines how we're working together. And with DARS being the lead, we're kind of the one getting out ahead of stuff and starting to create things. And I'll talk to you a little bit later about this, but we created a milestones framework and some expectations in terms of providers and some expectations in terms of products and activities and reports. And that went live back in April. And one of our goals was definitely on the DARS side, and we hadn't necessarily presented this to our DBHDS partner right away, but we wanted to have parallel frameworks. So we're drawing from the same provider community. And we felt like if DARS is going to do customized employment, and we're going to provide customized employment through the waiver, that we really need to have that consistency so that there's no confusion. We're not reinforcing strategies and approaches that are counter to what we're trying to do.
Right.
And so when we approached our partner at DBHDS and said we want to achieve this, there were some obstacles, and that's kind of that translating it to language. But more importantly, there was that buy-in. And so they said, absolutely, we see the value, we want to be able to do that. And they came up with a way to implement that framework within their system. They just had to translate it a little bit to fit within their system. And again, that's the quality of our partnership and our investment. And I think that kind of stuff, when you model that to the community and they see that, those are things that are very important then to translate down to the local level. And so at the state level we can do that, then we can have our VR counselors and our waiver folks and our CSB folks and our education folks sitting around the table and spending more time thinking about how can we collaborate, coordinate, braid and blend resources for the benefit of the individual we're serving versus that's your job. That's not my job. That's your turf kind of thing. Right. So really shifting that kind of stuff.
And it takes the confusion out of the system uses these acronyms, these terms, the system, others, and yet they're the same. So if you can come together like you've described and have that commitment, that buy-in, and then start talking about common language, you can move forward.
So, and I think that starts with being able to operationalize, right?
Yes.
What is this service going to look like? How are we going to measure success? What's our vision for that? And strong partnership. Thankful for that. So also kind of talking about how we can have partnerships that reach down to the local level. The other thing we started in Virginia, and this is very much a work in progress and something that as we move into our phase 2 work with Griffin and Hammes, I think we'll really be able to debug and build for success. But one of the things we did start doing is creating a forum where we could bring together representatives that worked in our provider agencies, that worked in our schools, that worked with waiver around the table, and we can kind of talk about what's going on in terms of developing frameworks, developing tools, implementing services, where there might be challenges, and give them an opportunity to have input, but then also use our partners from out in the field that when we bring them together to kind of be our feedback loop to talk about what's going on out in their communities.
Right.
And that way it can really help inform how we go about continuing to enhance services, provide technical assistance, whatever it might be. So we've started doing that. We're also looking, our goal is that we had the benefit of having some of this in place already because we were using a local teaming community of practice model in certain communities for our autism projects. But creating that community of practice at local field office levels where, again, we can have VR, we can have our vendors, our CRPS at the table, education, waiver, other partners in the community that can be a part of this. And it can be a way that folks can support each other as they're learning, as they're growing, that they can contribute new knowledge, new understanding, cross-fertilize in terms of discoveries, and really look at this as kind of being the catalyst for broader change in the community, a way to kind of model it and be that mirror that other providers can look at and they can learn from, even if it's just vicarious learning, because now they've got a peer that's investing in this. They're showing up, they understand the value, and it's going to increase their readiness to adopt these kind of practices.
And there's a lot of power in learning from peers, which is what the community of practice is grounded in.
Yeah, it's so powerful. And I know we've done more of that work with autism programs, but if I wasn't convinced 2 years ago, over the last 2 years as I've observed the work of some of these teams, to me that is high on the priority list, the value, just watching the energy that comes out of that. And seeing folks that maybe in the past had looked at each other as competitors, sit around the table and support one another and trust one another and respect one another and kind of have that sense of interconnectedness and being a part of something bigger. And I think that's the kind of thing that's going to really help move the needle along with the other components. So moving forward, I wanted to just really briefly talk about some of the products that we've started to realize from the work we've already done. And, again, frame this as this is just the start. We've got some good stuff coming out, but we feel like we're looking at this as a long game, not something that we're one and done kind of thing.
Right.
But, some of the products are really geared towards looking at this coordinated system of supports and recognizing that customized employment is a program that really, at its best, is going to involve a lot of different players and organizations and agencies. And so taking that interconnected and coordinated ecosystem approach, we've done things like at the VR agency having meetings with our business development team, which is kind of our business service unit side of our VR program, our AT experts, or our folks that are running our work incentives counseling program, and just making sure that we're already planning ahead for how to maximize their expertise as we roll this stuff out. We're looking at standards of practice that are designed really with fidelity of service in mind, right? We want to make sure it's done well. That's something we're going to be exploring more too in that next grant as we look at some of the fidelity scale administrator training and some of the other elements.
Through the grant that we're working with y'all on.
Yeah, I'm excited about that. Yeah, we're looking at things that are built for the marketplace, and what I mean by that is, if we're going to develop customized employment as a VR agency and we're going to do some rate setting, if we expect quality service, we need to fund it at a rate that's commensurate with the types of work that they're doing and the types of outcomes they get, and that we reinforce agencies that are investing in this and getting positive outcomes for us.
Yeah, the skill sets are very different.
And I don't think I realized that until I had a chance to go through the training and now have sat in a lot on work that's being done at the field level and consult on cases, interact with individuals that are receiving the service and the providers, and really understand some of the learning curves, the growing pains, and the growth that's going on. That, really when you look at customized employment, and I know folks say this sometimes, we do good SE, and if we do good SE, it's really the same thing as customized employment. But I would say, and definitely in this Griffin-Hammes type of model that we're using with the Discovering Personal Genius, there are some very unique aspects to this, and you need to do it right, and you need to kind of follow that process. And
with fidelity.
With fidelity, yeah. So those are just some examples. I'm not going to get a whole lot into the training because this is something that you're going to be talking about more, Nancy. And so just to know that we are developing training programs and working with our experts and looking also at kind of building capacity within our state so that for the long term, we have ways to continue to develop expertise. Snapshot of the training. Our first round of training, we had 128 trained. 118 of those folks went on to get their certification in customized employment through ACRES. And then from there, at this point, we have 28 to 30 ESO staff that have actually submitted documentation up to our agency and said, hey, I want to start providing this service. And I hope that number will grow more and more over time as we're doing this work and invest in organizations.
And just real quickly, for those who don't know, ACRE is the Association of Community Rehabilitation Educators. It's a national organization for those of us who train and educate those individuals who are going to be working in the area of best practices around employment and individuals with disabilities. So it is important as a national certificate that indicates competency around learning this methodology.
I need to bring you around with me everywhere I go. The alphabet soup, I get in trouble all the time for my jargon. And then again, training in TA, a lot of what we've talked about is focused on the provider community, but recognizing that we need to look at this holistically and making sure that our vocational rehab counselors and our office managers and our leadership within the agency are trained, and maybe not getting the same kind of training we're doing with the providers, but get the information so that they know how to purchase a service and case manage it and ensure that there's fidelity and contribute at the appropriate level as a voc counselor.
Right.
And then a lot more coming in our round 2, which I'm really excited about. I'm going to go ahead and slide through these. I feel like you and I have covered this stuff, and you're going to go into a little bit more detail, but this is just general overview of some more of the products that we've created. If anyone that watches this presentation would like to see this information, my contact information is going to be at the end of the training, and I would be happy to share any examples of products, policies, guidelines that we've created in Virginia that we're using. This goes into a little bit of information about who we're targeting. Again, I'm not going to read this out, but we had a very specific target population that we wanted to look at, really from a pragmatic perspective of where's the best place to start with customized employment and looking at folks with the most significant challenges to employment and individuals with ID and DD. More information, we've talked about the training, and so we have set up some standards with providers, and it is tied to that certification that you were just talking about. And this is an example of our milestones format that we're using. A little bit more information here just in terms of kind of the ideas, the values and process, how we want to implement it, recognizing that with customized employment, we want to implement it as a complete service. Rather than just having discovery as maybe a standalone, we want to look at if we've got somebody, we've identified them as a good fit for customized employment. They've made an informed decision to follow this pathway. We're making good decisions, and so when somebody starts down this path, that we're very likely to follow it all the way through and come out with a customized employment result. Other things that we wanted to make sure of too is, really recognizing with customized employment that we wanted to allow for wraparound supports. So as we're working with somebody, whether we identify that there would be somebody, because they have SSA benefits, who would benefit from learning about work incentives or getting a work world profile to understand, what will happen when they go to work, and be in a position where we can plan ahead, and take advantage of whether it's work incentives or other strategies to really kind of ensure that they had a supported kind of gradual transition into employment and were able to maximize the benefit of those benefits. Also looking at things like assistive technology is being a really good option, and again, kind of rolling that into the discovery process. And as a matter of fact, the tool that we use, which is developed by Griffin Hammes, the discovery staging record, I love that tool because it has those prompts in there for us, so that as we're doing that work with the individual, we're asking, is this something that would be important? Do we need to make a referral? And how can we integrate this into the work that we're doing?
So I'm going to shift into a little bit of the details of the work that we do involving the training. The piece that I think is critical is the trainings that we provide are competency-based. That's very different. There are expectations for knowledge transfer and actual demonstration that the individuals involved learned the methodology. And it's more in a didactic setting, and I'll show you some photographs of the folks who've been through that. But also it's very much experientially structured, that we are experiencing and testing out and practicing in the safe environment of a training setting with subject matter experts what the methodology is, so that people understand once the training has been completed that, yeah, I'm not just looking at this through the lens of my past experience, which may be very disability oriented, or my lived experience where my worldview could impact what we're talking about with best practices. So I love that piece. And for folks to have earned the ACRE certificate, they have to pass the post-testing. The beautiful piece about competency-based testing, though, is that when we base the testing on what we know works, that there's data that shows, yes, if we use this methodology, people learn how to implement discovery and customized employment. So that improves the quality of services we provide. We're implementing what data has shown works. And it also raises at the national level standards so that the work that we're doing is grounded in what data has shown works. The technical assistance piece differs from the competency-based piece in that we're talking about performance improvement. So as the individuals learn the knowledge through the competency-based training, we then continue to practice that methodology under the tutelage of subject matter experts. We measure, so we use the metrics to show improvement. It's immersion. We are actually getting out and practicing. It can be unfair to have a classroom-like setting and then say, okay, you've said it on this training, you know what we're talking about, so go out and do it. Well, that is not fair as people are learning things. So we focus on practice. I don't know any profession that doesn't have periods of practice before the individuals go out and actually do the work in real life settings. And so the final piece is that it provides a roadmap for continuous quality improvement, because we always want to incorporate learning, new data that comes out as we continue to test out and move forward with what's the best, greatest way to help people have working lives. So there may be emerging practices that we test and we find that There is great data that shows, yes, this might work. We move that into best practices because there's some consistency, and then to evidence-based practices because we use the scientific model to show that absolutely this methodology results consistently if done with fidelity in these outcomes.
Nancy, and I would say what you just outlined there is something really critical. One of the things that we've learned is for organizations that are looking to develop customized employment services, that they need to come in eyes wide open and kind of make sure their expectations are in line with that model. And I think sometimes folks just think they put somebody in a class, they learn the information, and they're going to go out and do it, and they're going to do it great. But it really is, there's a method to developing that experience, and it's something that requires more than just learning. It requires going out there and using those skills and having those expert mentors to help folks hone in and really master the interventions and the practice.
Absolutely. Making sure people know what the expectations are. If you are going to be selected to be a part of this training, then these are the commitments you have to make. The other thing that's critical is we've got to make sure that the manner in which we are supporting people to learn is also best practices. Adults learn very, very differently than what children, teenagers learn. The methods, the approaches. Adults have lived and worked experience. They have been independent. They daily solve problems and are very self-directed. They have either established a worldview or in the process of, and all of this impacts their motivation to change. So we utilize adult learning theory. Malcolm Knowles is one of the pioneers, and what research found is that individuals who are a part of a learning environment, and that's exactly what we've been talking about with the work that Griffin Hammes is doing. They need to know the reason that the information is being taught. They also need to have task-oriented processes incorporated into learning the methodology, and that includes practice. The content has to be relevant to their life or work. And that it's a less formal process. There's a give and take. Participants are actively part of how we move through the process of learning. Along that same vein, they are respected as equal partners in the process of learning. And interaction, socialization, engagement has got to be a part of the process too. The next slide shows a little bit of what the classes look like, the educational process looks like, where people are actively involved. This has to do with field work, where the participants had to go out and assess the business needs and culture. So I'm going to quickly just, again, go through some of the information around what the mentoring looks like as we work together in the process of transferring knowledge. The informational interview is one of the methodologies. I'm going to just show you some of the work of what the project participants went through. So through informational interviews, we're focusing on businesses and job seekers, not CRPs, not a pity model. But we're actually beginning to dig into learning about the world of business. Remember, we said the skill sets to do this work are very different. They involve understanding the work culture, speaking the language, having a presence. So we'll talk more about that as we do the training, but it's a very different set of skills from caregiving, or just making, which is important, making sure people are safe in buildings, but that's not going to result in the person having a quality life. So during the informational interviews with businesses, we're looking at the history, the culture of the business, unmet needs, employee training, what does that look like? The values and missions of the organization, the product or service they're providing, community involvement, and that's key because, again, that shows a different worldview than a business that doesn't give back to the community and are just looking at their business as a profit center. Community involvement is really grown more and more in the 21st century because people want to give back. They want to do more. They want to make their community stronger. And that is an important piece of kind of how we look for cues that this organization is going to get what we're talking about with a diverse workforce. And so we do research on all of these factors before we even begin to go out to see the business. And we also look at any kind of expansion goals that they want to move into. So this is the field work. This is where the teams went out. They chose businesses that they went through an informational interview with. There are distinct questions that are taught regarding employer engagement and how we dig into learning who these small business owners are and the mission and vision of the business and finding out unmet needs. So after each community-based activity or field work, as we call it, where people go out and practice the methodology, they come back, they do a presentation to the group, talk about what was learned, what worked, what didn't work, kind of a self-assessment of how they felt they did, any additional support they would like for us to provide as they're learning this methodology. And so it truly is part of that practicing before you're put in a situation to implement this methodology with job seekers. And it's really powerful. I just wanted to point out this particular, this was part of the debrief of a team, the PowerPoint that they presented to discuss with the participants in the particular region where this team participated. So it was an informational interview in a women's clothing boutique. One of the values of the owner was that it was important to her to source clothing that is eco-friendly and produced in a socially conscious manner. That's important because what we immediately realize, this business owner has a worldview. They care about the environment, and they care about the working conditions under which people make clothing. So someone with those values is going to more than likely get the importance of inclusive communities, diversity, increasing the workforce where everyone has an opportunity to earn a living and have a working life. We also found out, as this team did such a great job of completing the informational interview, that there were needs. What they were identified by the business owner was that she needs an assistant and she would train that assistant. The expansion goals are that she wants to open up her business to local artists in all the different ways that art can be created, from clothing to visual arts to jewelry. And she wants to be able to sell their products in her store. And again, support the local businesses, the local artists in the area where she lives and works. So those are the kind of things we look for because they get it. That's an indicator. The next one, I'll quickly move through. This was a really interesting store that customizes shoes to a particular structure of an individual. And what we found as the teams went out and met with this particular business owner and find out all about those components that we just looked at, the slide before where we looked at the vision, mission of the business, expansion needs, etc., was that this particular business owner needs assistance with health and sports events. He's very involved in the community, gives back, so he needs help with that, and also assistance in the store, especially during hours where there are a lot of patrons coming in, and he's tied up in some of the business expansion and design of what he wants to further grow as a business. So that was a powerful opportunity as well.
Nancy, as you talk and share these, it strikes me that kind of the characteristics of somebody that would do good with this work, like somebody that's able to kind of look at things out of the box and has a curiosity for discovering things. It's kind of like little Columbos going out there and learning all this new information that if you just went into a business and, on the surface didn't really pay attention to this stuff, that you would never know. Yeah,
you really, there is a transformation in how you begin to look at this great work we do. It becomes an economic development model, not a disability-specific model. It also becomes a model of where you go in and you start to look for opportunities and business needs that aren't being met. So sometimes the business owner doesn't even recognize are part of the stressors because he or she is so busy in the day-to-day functions of what have to be done for the business to move through the day. Informational interviews are also used with job seekers. It's an opportunity for the job seekers once they begin to identify through the discovery process emerging vocational themes where we can meet with them with individuals who do the kind of work that they're interested in. We go to where in the community that genius is, people who do this work, who have this knowledge, and they can help provide insights regarding what it's like to work in those particular types of jobs that the person is showing an interest in, where the particular job seeker's skills would fit in to specific aspects of that particular world of work, and where they would be a good match. So again, it's going to the genius, going to where the people know what it's like to work in these particular areas. Quickly, the visual resume is a very different process. What we look for is trying to create imagery and content that's going to get at the interest of the person who would be hiring. And we're not talking about labor market processes, going to vacancies where jobs are being recruited for, particular job descriptions that are not flexible. We are talking about customizing employment based on what we've learned during the discovery process. And one thing we know more and more from progressive business owners is that they are wanting to hire more, or I guess I should say, they want to do more, they want to do smarter hiring. And that involves getting to know who the person is in terms of their characteristics and personalities that can enhance the culture of the business and what they look for in an employee. So the critical piece with that is for the visual resume to show more about who the person is in terms of their characteristics, their personality. And the visual resume can tell the story of the individual as it relates to work that they're seeking. So using high-resolution action photos with descriptive narratives that really get to the skills of who this person is. That is so much more powerful than a one-dimensional paper resume. This absolutely shows so much more. It's richer information about who this person is and who can make a valuable employee in this community garden. This is just one slide of the visual resume, so I think that's pretty apparent. And finally, I wanted to just demonstrate by sharing with you that job proposals come after the vocational themes have been identified, the informational interviews have been identified in terms of what businesses might be a good match, and the skills of who the job seeker is match well to the needs of the business. So this is a great, brilliant proposal that one of the teams in this first year project came up with. The business had a nostalgia theme. They had a museum that showed all the various aspects of the past, from toys to clothes to just a variety of nostalgia from the past. And that's the area that the business was focusing on. They had a museum, they had a classic movie theater that played old classic movies, and an ice cream parlor. So as the training team that we were working with went out after the informational interview, they came back with an idea, because we were working on, okay, take the information you learned regarding the informational interview and develop a job proposal. So they came up with this fantastic job proposal that ties into either a business within a business or resource ownership that brings into the fold candies from your childhood. Candies that that may have been available in the 60s and 50s and later. And with it being a business within a business model as opposed to resource ownership, this is how it could look, that through braiding of funding of the various state organizations that are part of this project, they looked at the job duties, which would be assisting customers with purchases, stocking the kiosk and the main inventory, and the kiosk is part of what would be purchased for this individual to be able to have a business within a business. That would be their charge. The wage, $8 an hour at least, and the equipment, again, if you think about all the money that goes into Medicaid waivers and other funding sources, to purchase the kiosk for the business, in keeping with the nostalgic theme, this vintage cash register, vintage candy scale, and then the old-fashioned candies. It totaled $3,550 for this person to set up a business within a business that she oversees around a product that fit well with this particular existing community business that they hadn't tapped into. So product expansion that fits with this nostalgia theme. And I'm going to finish real quickly. These are some of the accomplishments that were achieved during the first year. We completed home visits to show that that's a very different process than maybe you're familiar with more of a social work type of home visits. The discovery home visit looks very different. Also, we held customized employment team consultations plannings, worked with job seekers and employment specialists, completed discovery activities and crafted discovery profiles, practiced informational interviews in the local business community, provided TA on organizational transformation, moving into best practices, hosted CE meetings with job seekers and support teams, met with DAR staff to discuss CE and job seeker criteria, provided consultation to high school transition staff, and provided follow-up distance consultation as the grant ended. We didn't want to lose contact in the process of where we were when we were having the in-the-state visits. So I know that's a lot of information to go through, but hopefully it gives you enough of the grounding around systemically what's going on to make this happen, and then what the training looks like, so that we are actually helping people learn this methodology, helping them practice it before they are expected to go out and use it in a real job situation. So they're with safe people in safe places learning these skills. And then the growing the project from one year to the next. And I know that you'll hear more about year 2.
That's right.
Of the project.
Very excited about it. A lot of good foundational learning that we're going to use and leverage that as we move into year 2 and figure out how to build a better mousetrap. It's been a fun experience. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for a great presentation, Richard and Nancy. I will now turn it over to Heidi, who will manage our question and answer phase. Thanks very much.
Hi, everybody. I hope you liked the presentation. There was a lot of information in there. As Nancy mentioned, it was pretty chock full, so that's a lot for people to absorb. I thank everybody who's given us questions so far, and I want to remind you to put any questions that you might have in the Q&A box. If you have any technical difficulties, go ahead and pop them into the chat box. But for our questions about the content of the webinar, go ahead and throw those in the Q&A, and we'll do our best to answer as many of them as possible. Today, as our guest, we have Vicki Brooke from our partner organization, Virginia Commonwealth University. She's going to tackle some of the questions that you have today, and I'm encouraging folks to go ahead and ask them now. I have a few of my own, but we want to make sure and get to as many of yours as possible. So go ahead and feel free to pop them in there anytime. And Vicki, thank you so much again for joining us. It was fun last time we got together, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was great fun. So I'm back again.
Fantastic.
Can you see me? No?
Can't see you yet.
All right. Well, maybe that's better, not to see me.
The host has to.
I think, does the host have to do something?
I might have to. Let me see.
Working on it.
There we
Well,
go.
you don't need to see me. We can get started.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and I'll work on making you visible, Vicki.
Okay, very cool. Well, Vicki, I'm going to start with Regina's question. She's asking, is customized employment like job carving, which we used to do? If not, how are they different?
I think one of the big differences, and I don't know if we have another question, I think I saw related to discovery. I think that is really the big difference, the big piece here. So let me answer both those questions at the same time. So discovery is not assessment. So we sort of think of assessment as you get a certain score, you're in or you're out, some do well, some don't do well. Where discovery is really that you are just really trying to get a vision of that individual, their interests, wants, preferences, likes, dislikes, support needs. And so you're not going to get that by using any of our educational or vocational standardized tools. It's really being in the family's home, and as Nancy was saying, that not like a typical home visit that you might have in a typical educational or social work program that you learn, but this is going to be going into the home and really having the individual go about some of their activities and kind of learning from that. So when we talked about job carving in the past, we did negotiate different tasks, or we carved out certain tasks to match what our individual strengths were. Where a lot of customized employment, you may go into a situation and there's no job description. So you're really starting from fresh. You're really going into that business, and maybe you have some insight on what are some of their business needs. And you're really starting from that ground, from that base floor, and kind of building up from there, a whole job description.
So Vicki, that means that discovery is different in that it's not using a just standard across the board instrument. It's more tailored to the person to find out more about them as an individual and how that's going to match up with job opportunities that may come up or that are created. Is that
correct? Yeah.
Okay.
So, and I think in our minds, typically assessment means a particular score, or you get in or you're out, or where discovery is just something very broad, and you're just gathering information about that individual that's going to help you kind of do that match for employment.
And it makes sense and kind of ties in with what Richard was saying about thinking outside the box and really taking the time to get a feel for what the individual is going to be really great at, what they're interested in. I don't know that the instruments previously have been great about finding or tailoring to someone's strengths. You can get a lot of good information from an assessment, but you can't necessarily find out what somebody is going to stick with, or what their interests are. So it's going to be people are going to retain those jobs.
Yeah,
so
think about the communication support needs what a lot of our folks have. So a lot of those instruments don't really give way to people who communicate differently. So being able to be out in the community and experience that, or seeing somebody who responds behaviorally to something, will give you clues on what they're communicating to you.
Right, and it will definitely give you a lot of information about what's going to be sustainable for folks, both on the employer end and on the employee end.
Yeah, excellent. So, exactly. Yes.
Super. Well, we took care of Janice's question too with discovery. Pam has a question. Can you give examples of what you are asking your COPs to do to support this? Agenda items, talking points. I believe that goes back to when Richard was talking about pairing up with partner organizations and kind of getting that the common language together and figuring out ways that you're going to do things together, and forming that community of practice really helps give a platform for folks to kind of get on the same page with each other if they're going to braid services, especially like if they have different acronyms and different languages. So I think what Pam's asking is about what these COPs might do to support those kinds of braiding and blending of services.
I think customized employment is really kind of a really new way of doing business. So having that community of practice and really talking through how it's different, it's different this way, or it's different that way, or what is the Department of Rehab Services role in this whole process. And then if you're working with, an individual who is in public school still, bringing in the school program and how that fits into the IEP. So really, Richard was talking about the alphabet soup that he wished he could talk about with Anthony. There is a lot of, alphabet soup, and they very easily talked about, your personal genius, but really I haven't heard that except associated with customized employment.
Sure.
They also talk about discovery in terms of hanging out with intent. Well, it would be very hard for Department of Rehab Services to pay you to hang out with intent. But you'd want to, I would think it would be hard for me to pay somebody to hang out with intent. But unless you define that, what does that mean? That's not, I kind of get it, but you'd want to make that to be meaningful to the whole community of practice. So we all had an understanding what we were doing there.
And also put it into language that, promotes that activity while making it not sound like you're going down to the, soda shop and hanging out and listening to the jukebox.
Yeah,
So,
we're not just hanging out. But what are the meaty things that we're going to look for and get some information on? Yeah.
right. Vicki, I think I may have enabled your camera. Do you want to check it real quick?
Start video.
Yep.
Oh, there I am.
There you are.
I'm
Hi.
back up. Hi. Oh, maybe it was
All right.
better blacked out. I don't know.
I think having faces talking instead of just disembodied voices is
Everybody
usually
uses my
helpful for
PCU,
people.
RAM.
Right, and look, you're showing the spirit, so that's fantastic. So we took care of Pam's question. Ooh, she has another one. Who are on the COP teams, the community of practice teams? And I think that's just within what we were talking about before. Who would sit on those teams? Who would be involved? I think sometimes a lot of people kind of feel like maybe they don't get included, or it's only top tier management who gets to participate in things. With communities of practice, and in my experience in them, it's been pretty much kind of across the boards, different levels of people in terms of jobs and different job titles. And partially it's so that folks can learn from one another. What's your take on that when it comes to VR communities of practice when braiding and blending services?
I would really want the boots on the ground people. Maybe that's just where my heart is, but those are the people who are going to be implemented on a day-to-day level. Okay, maybe we'll have other people to come into our community of practice and talk from a VR perspective, but I'd want the employment service organization to know about the braided funding with VR, or I'd want the local public school who has an IEP know who the rehab counselor is, and I'd want the rehab counselor to be able to have a relationship with the public school and how they interface. So I guess, yes, we want administrative types really to kind of share their knowledge perspective, but really the community of practice really should be the people who are implementing the practice, it seems.
Agreed.
I think those are the strongest ones that I've seen.
Yeah, and again, learning from one another. And when Richard was talking about having different acronyms for the same thing in different agencies, it seems logical to have that community of practice so you can come to agreement on which terms you're going to use and your common language about what you do. I've worked in several places where they had acronyms. One place had they called things TA, and it could be a teaching assistant, it could be total analysis, and it could be something else, TA, and it depended on the context
Certainly.
which one it was. So I think even that, and that was just in one organization. So I think that getting that common language, again, the communication, and community of practice that I've been involved in seem to build really good relationships with people. You do that bridge building out to other organizations, and then you can kind of really help one another better if you have kind of that connection. So
you all are so good at all of that. I mean, you really are. The other thing I would add is that what we didn't say is that individuals with disabilities should also be part of that community of practice.
right.
I would want to know from their perspective how they want this program to be introduced into the community. So if I'm not directly with my employment specialist when they're doing it, what is my employment specialist saying? How are they presenting the program? How are they presenting individuals with disabilities? So they have a big stake in all this.
Right. And with people with disabilities, I've heard it for other groups of people who, are people who do work around these groups. Nothing about us without us. So
Absolutely.
having people have that stake in it, and having a say in how it goes, because none of us really like having our agency taken away, do we?
No, but I think we would all feel more comfortable being directed that way. I think just sometimes we forget to be more inclusive with that.
Absolutely. Let's see. It is 12:21 my time, so we have a number of questions to get through, and we have some announcements too. So we're going to try to handle as many of these as possible. Otherwise, we'll take these questions down and make sure that we have them answered within our community of practice. So
Heidi, why don't I do the announcements real quick, and then
sure.
then come back to the questions, and
That
hopefully
would be
Vicki
great.
can stay on for a few minutes as well,
Definitely.
half past the hour time. So there should be a link. If not, Jennifer will be posting in the chat box. So if you'd like a CRC for today's webcast, the link that's in the chat box, or will get added shortly, contains the steps to request the CRC. It can also be found on our webcast page, projecte3.com. And tomorrow, as we do after all the webinars, you will get an email with these instructions as well as an evaluation form for today's webinar. But again, if you have questions about CRCs, please send those to projecte3, T as in Terry, C as in cat, @gmail.com, and we can post that in there as well. So that's it on those kinds of pieces. Again, and we also post all the recordings of all of these webinars, including all the question and answer. It'll probably take a couple weeks to get all that done, and the CRCs can take up to a couple weeks to get all those out to you. So with that, Heidi, I will hand it back to you.
Sounds good, Terry. Thank you. Vicki, I'm looking at the questions, and we have two of them about ACRE. Somebody wanted to know what the acronym stood for, and somebody asked if certification is part of your model or optional. I think they're asking that of the presenters, Nancy and Richard. So is ACRE certification part of that model? I'm not sure if you're going to know the answer, but I'm pretty sure you can tell us what ACRE is.
CRE.
Alphabet soup.
Right here. It's the Association for Community Rehabilitation Educators.
Super.
So not all training is ACRE certified, but so we have VCU offers online coursework. We have to submit our coursework to ACRE. They approve it, and then you become ACRE certified and you follow their processes. So we're not the only ones who are ACRE certified. So there's programs all across the country, but usually if there's a training and it's ACRE certified, it will say that in the training. The nice thing about ACRE certification is it's a national certification, so it's portable. So like your CRC credits, ACRE is similar to that.
Super. I have two questions that I think merge into each other, and I'm not sure if we can answer them or not. From Marcella and from Janet, they're talking about the website from the agency that has more information, and I believe that's for the training program. And that's Richard and Nancy mentioned it in there. I think we're gonna have to take that one offline, do a little research, and see if we can get that web page out to you.
Richard was probably talking about the Virginia training, but it's also the Griffin-Hammas training, so I can get those both to you, Heidi.
Okay, that sounds good, and we'll put them in the email for the CRC info tomorrow. Okay. And Janet asks, have you set up any customized employment jobs, and if so, can you explain what positions they are?
Holy cow. Yes.
In one paragraph or less, right?
Okay. So I guess I would say I don't supervise, I don't manage, but I have like 18 employment specialists and a project director over them who are all doing customized employment. So there is many jobs, I mean, as many clients as they have on their caseloads, they have jobs. So almost all of them, I would say, are all customized employment positions. They are jobs that did not exist before the employment specialists contacted that employer. They developed it together after completing a discovery process with the individual they're serving. So yeah, there's no one particular job or one particular industry.
Sure, that makes sense. And if you're trying to tailor it to the individual and and have sustainability and longevity, there's probably not, in the book from the federal government that talks about each of the different job descriptions and what the employment outlook is. There probably aren't a lot of those customized jobs that would neatly fit under those categories. But really, whose job ever does?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I think
that's very true.
Everybody usually puts and other duties as assigned. So all
Yeah.
of us have a little bit of that in our jobs, I think.
And there are probably bullets within those, that it's within that organization, but I've taken that and just developed a new job description within it.
Right. And a lot of the times job descriptions have pretty broad language, so it can include some things that they may not have thought of when putting together the position description. So let's see. Judith asks, Richard said in the beginning that they are only accepting CIE closures in Virginia. Is that the model for VR? Is this for this model or for VR in general? He'd like to know more about how they assess to determine if somebody is ready for CIE or not.
So I lost your audio, but Richard said they're only accepting CIE closures.
Yeah, in Virginia. And
well,
then
it's really, that comes back from the federal government, well, it's not so new anymore, but it's the WIO legislation that it's that they're really going to a model where there's no sub-minimum wage. So the positions have to be competitive integrated employment. So Virginia, yes, is there, and it really happened in our state after after WIOA.
Okay, that sounds good. David asks, hello Heidi and Vicki, can you discuss at all what some of the range of costs for discovery services are that CRP are charging? I don't know if that's something that we can catch in the few minutes that we have left. So David, I think we're going to go ahead and have that question recorded, and we'll get an answer to you within our community of practice. But thank you for asking. Tim asks, does VCU offer any of their ACRE training online?
Yes.
Well, that was quick.
I will send Heidi the web link for it.
Okay, sounds good. Judith asks, where can we find links to learn more about the evidence-based research on customized employment that was spoken about in the presentation? So that's a really important part, to have it be evidence-based. Any tips?
Okay, so we currently have a grant on a research grant on customized employment. I mean, I will say that customized employment was in federal legislation before there was really good research on what customized employment is. I mean, they talk about it, how it stands on the shoulders of supported employment, which was used in that legislative language. But what does that mean? What does discovery actually look like? So as a provider, I would ask the very same question. What are the fundable activities related to discovery? And it can't be hanging out with intent, because nobody wants to fund you for that. All right.
No.
So a lot of that research is going on right now. There's quality indicators related to customized employment. So I will give that to Heidi too. Heidi, are you making a note of this?
I am.
You are? Good.
And